So, folks, we're going to take a look at an interview that Tyler Cohen did with former President Barack Obama. And in this, I'm not going to lie, I'm going to be kind of mean to Obama. Largely because I attribute a lot of the mire that we are currently in to the failure of Barack Obama's neoliberal pandering as president. A lot of his economic policies, like bailing out banks but not homeowners, the considering banks too big to fail, his drone war. I think a lot of this only served the interests of capital. I don't think it was actually helpful to everyday working class people. And so I'm going to be a bit negative on Barack Obama. Well, I think that his failures lead directly to Donald Trump being elected, and not just because of racism, but because of some pretty profound failures inherent to his neoliberal ideology. So let's dive in, shall we?
Mr. President, thanks so much for joining me.
It is wonderful to be here, Brian. Thank you for having me.
So, as you know better than anybody, the discourse has devolved into a level of cruelty that we haven't seen before. What was disqualifying just a few years ago now not only feels fine, acceptable, but actually rewarded. You have administration officials saying that the victims of ISIS aggression are domestic terrorists. You have J.D. Vance coming out and saying that it's okay. You don't have to apologize for being white. Just days ago, Donald Trump put a picture of your face on an ape's body. And so again, this is kind of, we've seen the de-evolution of the discourse. How do we come back from a place that we have fallen into?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to recognize that the majority of the American people find this behavior deeply troubling. It is true that it gets attention. It's true that it's a distraction. But, as I'm traveling around the country, as you're traveling around the country, you meet people. They still believe in decency, courtesy, kindness. And there's this sort of clown show that's happening in social media and on television. And what is true is that there doesn't seem to be any shame about this among people who used to feel like you had to have some sort of decorum and a sense of propriety and respect for the office, right? So that's been lost. But the reason I point out that I don't think the majority of the American people approve of this is because ultimately the answer is going to come from the American people. And we just saw this in Minnesota, in Minneapolis. It is important for us to recognize the unprecedented nature of what ICE was doing in Minneapolis, St. Paul, the way that federal agents, ICE agents, were being deployed without any clear guidelines, training, pulling people off, out of their homes, using.
Again, part of what leaves such a terrible taste in my mouth about this is that Obama was president and ICE operated under him. Like, Obama famously deported a colossal number of people during his presidencies. ICE has been terrible the entire time. Like, ICE has been terrible the entire time. They were just doing it in a way that was deemed more acceptable. Like, they were doing it in targeted ways, in they were going after the bad ones. That was the excuse they always gave. It was still not good. It was still something that had previously been done by INS. And INS had its problems prior to the formation of ICE in like 2003. But legitimately, we can solve this problem of undocumented immigrants in this country with like 1,000 bureaucrats and simply documenting them and sending out fines. Like anything more than that, like, oh, okay, someone is a criminal, someone is criminally missing their court dates. We can just have local police look for them. Or if that's a problem, we can have like a limited number of INS agents go and find them, which is how it operated in the past. There is no reason for a paramilitary force to be doing this. And so, like, I don't know, it's been clearly weaponized in order to essentially hold the threat over the heads of undocumented workers, to get them to accept worse and worse working conditions and pay. It has been very clearly weaponized, and it was weaponized back in the day, too. Like, this wasn't new. It was dissolved in 2003. Why? Because they rolled it into what ICE was. Like, God, the entire DHS, in my mind, needs to be abolished. Again, we do not need all of these Border Patrol agents and ICE agents, because I want to remind you guys, a lot of the people who are doing all this fucked up shit here in Minneapolis are not just ICE, it's also CBP. It's Customs and Border Patrol. In fact, in a lot of ways, CBP is considered worse. You know, I've talked about the stories and the news coverage of them like deliberately manufacturing situations in which they could shoot people in cars. It's really, really disgusting. Again, like I guess I just take issue with the idea that how ICE is acting right now is unprecedented when it's very much precedented, and it was precedented by this president.
5-year-olds to try to
bait their parents.
Yeah. All the stuff that we saw, tear.
Like, I'm sorry, there are 3,800 children held in the Dilley, Texas facility right now. Like, it's not limited to just the children from Minneapolis. ICE has been taking kids the entire time.
Gassing.
Like children were in cages during the first Trump presidency. They were in cages during Obama's presidency. They were in cages during Biden's presidency. And it is a huge, colossal indictment that, like, Obama didn't get rid of ICE. Obama didn't get rid of DHS. Biden didn't get rid of ICE. Biden didn't get rid of DHS. It is a moral stain on our nation that we have allowed these privatized concentration camps to be established and maintained with the endorsement of the state, with the endorsement of both parties up until right now.
Crowds simply who were standing there not breaking any laws. So the rogue behavior of agents of the federal government is deeply concerning and dangerous. But we should take a moment to appreciate the extraordinary outpouring of organizing, community building, decency.
Yeah, that's all great, but recognize that it comes about as a result of colossal failure. Like, I love that people are applauding my community for the way it came together, the way people are selflessly donating their time, their bodies, their energy, their lives to keeping one another safe, but it only comes to this because of colossal systemic failure. A systemic failure that was put in motion and perpetuated by folks like Obama and Biden and George W. Bush and Donald Trump. It just makes me mad as hell. Because more than anything than like a pat on the back, I would love for the folks who have power, the folks who have influence, to actually be using that power and influence to fix the goddamn problem instead of congratulating us. Fix it. We don't want your congratulations. We want the masked, armed men to be gone. We want folks to not feel like they have to be afraid walking down the street.
Neighbors buying groceries for folks, accompanying children to school, teachers who were standing up for their kids, not just randomly, but in a systematic, organized way, citizens saying, this is not the America we believe in, and we're going to fight back, and we're going to push back with the truth, and with cameras, and with peaceful protests, and shining a light on the sort of behavior that in the past we've seen in authoritarian countries, and we've seen in dictatorships, but we have not seen in America. And that kind of heroic, sustained behavior in sub-zero weather by ordinary people is what should give us hope. And it should remind us that at the end of the day, the way we get a democracy that's working, the way we get policies that actually are helping working families get ahead, the way that we restore norms, rule of law, decency, it's going to be because we, citizens, are activated and paying attention and saying enough and saying, we have a different idea of what the American family should look like and community should look like. And that is what I'm seeing across the board. So, I was on a panel a while back, and I said, a lot of the values that we say we subscribe to, during easy times, during peaceful times, it's easy to say we believe in those things.
Right, when they're not challenged.
When they're not challenged. It's easy to believe in free speech when it doesn't seem like the government's trying to crack down on free speech. It's easy to say that we believe in the golden rule when we aren't at risk of being arrested when we exercise the golden rule.
Yeah.
Right now we're being tested. And the good news is what we saw in Minneapolis and St. Paul, and what we're seeing in places across the country, including here in Los Angeles, has been...
Strip it all back down to Border Patrol. I mean, I would even go with Border Patrol as we know it needs to be dissolved and redesigned from the ground up. Like, frankly, I don't really think we need a Border Patrol per se, but at the very least, the folks who are running it now, the folks who make up the rank and file of Border Patrol, should not be allowed to continue doing those jobs.
The American people saying, no, you know what, at least a good number of the American people saying, we're going to live up to those values that we say we believe in. And as long as we have folks doing that, I feel like we're going to get through this.
So I hear and appreciate what you're saying about the agency of individuals. As we look toward our elected officials, our democratic leaders, I think something that I've been having a lot of trouble reconciling is for so long it's felt like Democrats are solely focused on protecting norms, institutions, processes, and then you've got a Republican Party that sees what it wants and will find a way to get it. Laws be damned, Constitution be damned, rules be damned. And we're seeing that play out right now. And so, given this massive asymmetry, where it often leaves us feeling like it's a Lucy pulling the football away from Charlie Brown over and over and over again situation, what needs to be done? And do you think that our Democratic leadership and our Democratic elected officials understand that for the first time?
Well, look, I think we have to acknowledge that we've got the harder job, right? So we believe in government as a tool for good, as a potential force to create more jobs, and as a way to make sure that the planet doesn't roast, to make sure that as we move forward and the economy grows, that everybody and not just some are benefiting, and that kids are getting a good education. And what that
Night, Archangel.
means is that we have to think about the consequences of our actions. We have to try to figure out how do we get working majorities to actually pass laws and to implement those laws and to make things happen. Tearing stuff down doesn't require all that. So when you talk about Republicans, for example, it seems like they see what they want and they just go after it. Well, they've passed one significant piece of legislation since they've been, for all the hoopla, they haven't actually codified and institutionalized much of anything. They have poured a huge amount of money into ICE and their immigration agenda. And they've cut taxes for really wealthy people. And now they're trying to unravel a bunch of rules and norms and laws that are already in place. That's an easier job. So I say that because we should accept the responsibility and the challenge that our job's going to be a little bit harder. Because in order for us to get stuff done, like let's say the Affordable Care Act,
like, I don't know how to really put my frustration into words here. But like, I understand and appreciate his desire to maintain a productive positivity. But I really feel like at the point where we have masked gunmen abducting people off the street and concentration camps being built and maintained across the country, like talking about like, well, they only really passed one significant piece of legislation, but it was a pretty big one, wasn't it? Like, come on, Barack. It was a really, like, it moved around trillions of dollars. And like, weaponized a paramilitary force to be used against us. And it's so fucking frustrating.
well, we've got to cobble together a majority. And we've got.
And like, I do understand, I do understand and appreciate it, because he's saying something that I say a lot of the time, which is like, yeah, it's going to be hard, but like, we got to do it. Which I feel like it hits a bit different when it comes from me, someone who's in the same boat as all of you and not a former president, than when it comes from Barack Obama, who's like going and windsurfing with Richard Branson.
Got to persuade and we've got to convince. And so I do think that there's been some unwillingness on the part of Democrats in the past to break down some of the institutional barriers for us getting stuff done, just because, well, it's always been done that way. And I'll give you an example that frustrated the heck out of me when I was president, which was the filibuster in the Senate. The Senate is already structurally.
Jay Never Chill, thank you very much for subscribing. I very much appreciate the support.
Skewed and anti-majoritarian, right? It's hard for majorities to get stuff done, whether it's trying to pass civil rights legislation in the 60s or trying to get gun control legislation or what have you, because even though majority of people support it, Delaware and Wyoming have the same number of senators as.
Hey, you can call me Jess. Congratulations on finally getting a continual glucose monitor. 8 to 9 years fighting Medicaid. Oh my god. Congratulations. No more bruised covered fingers? Hell yeah. Good job. I'm really happy for you. Interesting question. Does the quality and carrying out of democratic services and laws rest on the shoulder of the president or the worker who can keep his or her job who can only keep his or her job if they carry out the desires of the guy that supplies the paycheck for their family? Do you see the problem here? Yes, of course I see the problem here. Thanks, Jay Neverchill.
California.
Yeah.
Right. All right. So that would require a constitutional amendment. You then compound that with a filibuster. And the truth is that Democrats for some time have been traditionalists in wanting to preserve that. When it blocks us from making government effective, which in turn makes people feel like government is corrupt and not caring about them.
Which lends itself
Which
to the
then lends
Republicans.
itself to the kind of, it gives folks like Trump an opening.
Yeah.
Right? So redistricting is another good example of where I strongly believe we should not be having politicians draw lines that determine who's voting for them. We should have voters
What gives what, Speed Razor?
decide who their politicians are. And, I've worked with Eric Holder to help set up the terrific work that, the NDRC has been doing to try to make sure that we have fair maps. But the fact that Governor Newsom here in California and others said, well, if they're going to try to gerrymander their way out of losing this upcoming midterm, then we're going to respond. And we're going to respond in a lawful way where we put it up to a referendum and let people decide and not just give away the store because of traditions. That was the right response. So I do think that.
Okay, I will say this about Obama here, which is that I think it is really good and useful and serves utility for Obama to come out and essentially say, team fight. One of the big debates that has been just raging in Washington, D.C. lately is whether or not Democrats should actually fight Republicans, or if, Democrats should roll over and play dead and let Republicans damage whatever. With the thought being that if you roll over and play dead, Republicans will damage so much that effectively the only outcome could possibly be that folks like you and I vote for whatever blue D is on the ticket, And I think Obama coming out and saying, nah, you gotta fight, I think that matters. And I think it matters specifically to the folks who are pretty predisposed to not fight, like Chuck Schumer, like Hakeem Jeffries, etc. So I think that that's pretty important, and I think that's useful. So I will give credit where it's due here. That might actually be useful. My saltiness aside about his general...
I don't want us to simply duplicate the behavior of the other side. I don't want us to have a slash and burn strategy where we don't care about rule of law. We don't care about some of the guardrails around our democracy. We start lying and having no regard for the truth the way the other side seems to be comfortable with right now. Because if that's how we fight, then we lose what we're fighting for. But that doesn't mean we have to get punked or be saps. And I do, or to cling to traditions just for the sake of tradition. I think what we have to continually evaluate is, in this moment in time, how do we make sure that we can advance our agenda in a way that reflects what's good for ordinary folks, not special interests, not simply the well-to-do, and how do we do that in a way that's consistent with integrity, honesty, democracy, the values that we claim to want to uphold. And I think it's possible to do that. But the reason I started with reminding ourselves, yes, we have a harder job, because sometimes I think we're tough on Democrats, saying, why aren't you being as mean and tough and nasty as they are? Well, it's when I was president of the United States, I suppose I could have simply unilaterally ordered the military to, go into some red state and harass and intimidate a governor there, or cut off funding for states that didn't vote for me. I could have exercised that prerogative, but that is contrary to how I think our democracy is supposed to work. And
I genuinely don't think you have that ability. Like, part of me is a bit like kind of perplexed even hearing him say, like, I could have exercised that prerogative. I don't think you have the legal authority to do that, actually. Like, yes, also he would have been impeached instantly in that political climate. And, like, it's a bit worrying to hear him even claim to have these powers when Donald Trump doesn't have these powers either. He's just doing it because no one will stop him.
And I think we shouldn't get discouraged by the fact that we have a tougher job. What we should do is expect that our side is smart enough to figure it out.
So you had mentioned persuasion, and I think that that's a really good point here, because as we eventually head toward a next general election cycle, we're going to be contending with a lot of the same infighting that's plagued Democrats before. You'll often have leftists and progressives butting up against liberals and moderates. And look, you are the ultimate pragmatist. And so what advice do you have as we head toward this election cycle, this eventual 2028 election cycle, so that we don't devolve into the same, 2016 era Bernie Hillary redux that feels like it always consumes the left?
Brian, it's because Bernie and Hillary have very different policies. It seems like it always consumes the left because we have a neoliberal wing of the party and like a progressive pro-working class wing of the party. And the neoliberal wing of the party brought us to where we are right now. Like, the way we avoid it is by embracing pro-working class values that the neoliberals have been too scared up to this point to embrace, because they know it might piss off their biggest donors.
Well, look, first of all, I think it's important to remember that the divisions in the Democratic Party tend to get magnified in the media. Relative to the divides that exist in most other countries, where you have a parliamentary system, you have multiple parties, and you got Green Party, and you got the center-left party, and you've got a socialist party, and sometimes you got a communist party.
Yeah.
Our differences get exaggerated. Listen,
No. Sometimes the differences aren't exaggerated. Hillary Clinton had a vastly different platform than Bernie Sanders. Like, sometimes the differences are, like, in fact, quite important. Like, the difference between the Affordable Care Act Medicaid expansions and Medicare for All. Pretty key difference.
Bernie Sanders believes, just like Nancy Pelosi believes, just like Chuck Schumer believes, just like Hakeem Jeffries believes, just like AOC believes, in equality and non-discrimination against people because of race or gender or sexual orientation. Well, all Democrats believe in that. That's a core value. Democrats believe that government should provide a strong safety net for people when they're down on their luck. Everybody I just mentioned believes in that. Everybody believes that.
And everyone believes that we need to means test that safety net until practically no one can use it.
There should be some regulation of the market so that you don't have monopolies and oligopolies that are simply dictating the terms of the economy. And that we should have a tax system that levels out some of the inequalities that result. So I think it's important for us to remind ourselves as a starting point, what do we have in common? Most of the time, the differences are tactical. Right? It has to do
no.
with, well, how much of a tax hike can people put up with? How much regulation should we be thinking about when it comes to climate change?
That's not tactical. That's really important. Like, if by tactical you mean the difference between everyone having healthcare and, you know, the majority of the population being on, like, private insurance, then no, that's not just a tactical difference. There's a meaningful difference and a meaningful, like, effect for working people. Like, it's not a tactical difference if, like, the EPA regulations of one candidate prevent, like, the poisoning of, like, a low-income area's water supply, whereas the other candidate doesn't have that. Like, that's actually a pretty big material difference. Not tactical, it's material. Even if we're talking about, like, winding down fossil fuel emissions, that's a material impact, not tactical.
And if we recognize that typically the arguments in the Democratic Party aren't about core values, but are really around tactics and how do you get stuff done, now we can have a robust debate. And I want a robust debate.
Yeah.
And what we can also do is not try to nationalize every issue all the time. This last off-year election, I think, was a great example. You know, you've got a candidate like Spanberger in Virginia, who runs what would be considered a more centrist campaign and runs a terrific campaign. And then you've got Mondami in New York, who runs a explicitly socialist grassroots campaign and excites and mobilize folks, and that can win in New York City.
Well, again, when you're talking about what campaign style can win where, that's a tactical difference. When we're talking about actual policy content, that is a material difference. And I do want to say, so far, Spanberger has been a welcome surprise. I was not expecting her to do as much as she's done so far, like cutting off ICE, collaboration between the state government and ICE. But, like, the difference he's citing here is a tactical one, not a material one.
Probably could not win in Virginia. And that's okay. That's healthy.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think we
But also, like, okay, just trying to tone this down a little bit. But when we're talking about the material end of things, like, say, hey, don't you think Virginians deserve buses that are fast and free? Don't you think they deserve free childcare? Don't you think they deserve, like, free community college education? Like, these are things that New York City has. These are things that other states have. These are material differences. And they're things that every Virginian deserves, just like every New Yorker deserves. Like, I don't think the actual material demands, the actual policy demands, vary that much from state to state, other than how do you implement those different policies, right? The tactics, on the other hand, might vary, because you might be running in, like, a more conservative area, and you might need to adopt your tactics in order to get that progressive message through. But, like, oh boy, I didn't expect this to get me so heated.
We get into arguments. A recent one, this idea that the quote-unquote abundance agenda is somehow a sellout, and folks on the left getting exercised because, this is part of this sort of corporate Democrats trying to... take over the party. Well, no, not really. What I think.
Well, no, not really. Sure, no one likes it except for extremely rich people and this elite group of journalists who have been pushing it on the behalf of wealthy elites. But it's not. They aren't selling out. Come on, man! Like, are you kidding me? Like, the people who wrote that the main thing that would fix the Democratic Party is undoing more regulation. Their big prescription is effectively doing more neoliberalism. And you're like, well, no, this isn't that big of a deal. It's silly that people are being thrown out of certain social circles for pushing this. And it's like, well, yeah, people are getting thrown out of certain social circles because it is politically tone deaf to be advocating for more neoliberalism when the out of touch nature that neoliberalism has inherently with the working class is exactly the main problem that we have right now in the Democratic Party. Like, good God.
It is entirely legitimate to say, for example, we need to build more affordable housing, which is going to require higher taxes on people like me and people who are well off in order to subsidize the construction of affordable housing, let's say in a place like California, and also be able to say, you know what, there are a bunch of well-intentioned rules and zoning laws and so forth that baby boomers like me and existing homeowners have used to block the construction of affordable housing, even in democratic cities. And so,
yes, that is one thing. That is a sliver of policy. The issue, though, is that when Ezra Klein is actually asked about this in conversation, he'll give examples of, say, oh, well, there are zoning laws saying you can't build low-income housing unless you spend extra money making sure they have adequate air filtration systems. And maybe we need to get rid of if they're too close to a highway. And maybe we need to get rid of those zoning laws that dictate that you need certain air filtration systems if you're close to highways. When, like, the very reason that those air filtration systems need to exist is so that people in those buildings don't fucking die of cancer. It turns out that's actually a pretty meaningful distinction. And when Ezra Klein talks about it, he talks about it as if, oh, well, it's pointless. It's basically antiquated. Do you want the air filtration systems, or do you want like a principled stand with no housing, or do you want an unprincipled stand with housing? Is essentially the argument he puts forward when talking about it. And like, we're not necessarily talking about the fact that, like, oh, well, the reason we can't solve homelessness is because of all the evil zoning laws. Like, yeah, you can find some examples where that's the case, but, like, we genuinely can overcome zoning laws. It's not impossible to do, number one. And number two, the entire argument is predicated on, like, the omnipresence of these zoning laws, and they are not everywhere. They are not the reason, by and large, low-income housing isn't being built. Yeah, regulations are generally written in blood. And it's very frustrating. I'm extremely frustrated. I'm trying to keep myself grounded, but, like, goddamn, this is difficult.
if we want to actually deliver housing rather than have some abstract argument, then we got to figure out not an either or of do we spend more money.
Honestly, kind of siding with the then we should make them Anakin meme right now. I mean, like, the issue here is that, like, we have other solutions, even outside of just overriding zoning laws. We have other options at our disposal. I'm sorry, cities own land. The federal government owns land. This land could be made available via job programs and development for low-income housing. We could, in fact, have solved this problem like 50 years ago if we had wanted to, and we didn't. It is insane to me that we had in this program, in this country, jobs programs that allowed us to build some of the largest infrastructure projects in human history, and yet we seem to now think that it's beyond our ability to employ enough people to build housing. That's insane. That is simply insane. And I think I've articulated this before, but I think part of what infuriates me about Obama in particular, and about neoliberal thought in general, is the lack of imagination, the lack of a coherent dream for a better future. Almost universally, it seems like many neoliberals come at this from a perspective of, we already live in the best of all possible worlds. And so, like, really, it's just about tweaking the formula and we'll get to a better place. But, like, the reality is, we don't live in the best of all possible worlds. And we have, in fact, some extraordinarily profound failures that result in, homeless youth, that result in folks who can't find work, that result in people who fall through the gaps in Medicaid, and people who fall through the gaps in like Social Security. And like, we can in fact solve all those problems. We can make sure people aren't falling through the gaps in our safety nets by universalizing those safety nets. We can make sure that like people have housing by making a jobs program that houses people. Like, this isn't an impossible thing to do. It just takes the vision and the power of dreams to do it. You have to be able to envision the better world. And if you are just sitting there looking at homeless encampments and being like, this is the best we got, I don't know what to tell you other than that is a failure to dream.
Or do we reform some of these things that are preventing the construction of affordable housing? We have to do both. And I want us to have those arguments. And one last thing I think that's I've noticed in a lot of our internal arguments, a lot of which, by the way, are taking place online, and ordinary voters, this is all completely off their radar screen. Yeah. One of the things I think it's important for Democrats, for us also to recognize, progressives to recognize, folks on the left to recognize, it's possible for us to have a moral sense of what is right and true and what needs to be done, and also recognize that we are in a particular time and place here in America, and voters are not going to agree with us 100% on everything. And so it is not a sellout, it's not a betrayal to say that we're going to shape our agenda and our message in a way that allows us to build a working majority to get stuff done. And I think particularly around social issues, sometimes we get confused around this. You witness what happened in Minneapolis, and you say to yourself, morally speaking, that 5-year-old child who's standing in front of that SUV as his father's being dragged off, that child is equal to mine or any child. His immigration status, his nationality, does not change the love and decency that we should be showing that child. But what is also true is that we're a nation of laws, we have borders.
But there's always a but with these guys. What are you talking about, Obama? That child was there legally? That's true. But also, if we're going to play this game, it's worth pointing out that we're a nation of laws. Do you think we should send people to concentration camps and rip apart their families and send them to countries that they have not built their lives in over the equivalent of a parking ticket? Because I don't think we should do that. Like, I'm sorry. Like, do you think that people deserve to be tortured for parking tickets? If the answer is no, then the exact same level of civil offense has been done by simply crossing the border in a way that is undocumented. When Obama sits there and says, "But we are a nation of laws," he is implicitly signing off on the treatment of these people, which, again, he implicitly signed off on the treatment of these people when he was president and did nothing about the treatment of these people. Has Obama ever gotten a parking ticket? Has Obama ever gotten a speeding ticket? I don't know. But I would not argue that Obama deserves to be imprisoned and tortured or deported to another country if he had. But he sits there, comfortable in his power and privilege, and says, well, maybe that child should be because we're a nation of laws. There are just no words. This is not, by the way, a tactical difference. This is a material difference.
And we've got to figure out an immigration policy that is orderly and that is fair and is enforced in a sensible way that is compatible with our values, but may not.
The way that would be compatible is if we had the INS essentially operating as a bunch of bureaucrats. And maybe we have the INS operate like the IRS does. The IRS has a handful of agents that have weapons if they need to go into the field to serve documents to someone or something. But there's no reason for it to be a paramilitary force. The vast majority of it should just be sending out paperwork for people to fill out and fines for not having already preemptively filled out said forms. That's it.
Fully capture.
Have a pathway to citizenship and a bunch of bureaucrats, and you can solve this problem.
The degree to which that kid should have the same chances in life as a U.S. citizen kid, but we've got to accommodate the reality that the majority of the American people think that there's a difference between somebody who's a U.S. citizen and somebody who's not.
Well, also, hey, Obama, there was a point in your presidency when the majority of the American people thought that it was a blasphemous sin to get gay married. How about that? Do we have to accommodate bigots who don't think gay people being married is acceptable? Is that, if that was the majority position, surely you would have had to kowtow to said bigots. Oh, wait, you did. Oh, my, what a failure. I don't know. It's almost like I reject this idea. I do have to say this. I reject point blank the idea that politicians act as apolitical agents, which is the idea that folks like Obama here are putting forward, right? The idea that, oh, hey, a politician is just a vehicle for the will of the people. And you are simply not supposed to make any arguments. You're not supposed to go out there and fight for any position. You are merely there to look at the polling from your district and do what is most popular. And no, that's actually not your job as a politician. Your job is to make an argument. Your job is to try and shift public opinion. Your job includes, baked into it, having to make the argument for things that will improve the lives of your constituents. It is not just to sit there and get baby-birded polling information so that you just do whatever it is you think they want you to do. Your job is to be there to look at all available data and to lead them. And leadership is not just regurgitating what they want. Sometimes leadership involves getting in front of your constituents and making an argument for something that they might not like, but maybe they need.
and that they want an orderly immigration system. And sometimes I think what happens in the online debate is if somebody suggests, well, we have to have some immigration enforcement, then somebody's going to point at that child and say, so you don't care about that kid, so you must be a bad person. The same would be true, let's say, here in Los Angeles around the homeless issue. I think,
oh boy,
morally, ethically speaking, it is an atrocity that in a country this wealthy we have people just on the streets, and we should have we should insist on policies that recognize their full humanity.
Yep.
People who are houseless and be able to provide.
I'm sensing the butt. The butt is getting bigger and bigger.
Provide them the help and resources that they need. But we should also recognize that the average person, doesn't want to have to navigate around a tent city in the middle of downtown.
Gee whiz. If only there was some kind of option available between staring helplessly at a tent city and recognizing the humanity and needs of the unhoused. If only there was other options available. This is exactly what I'm talking about. This is exactly what I'm talking about when I talk about a failure to dream, a failure of imagination inherent to neoliberalism. This idea that we're already in the best of all possible worlds, so the only options here are stare at Tent City and having to navigate around it, or recognizing their humanity and doing nothing about said tent city. The solution here is housing them, you stupid bitch! My God! The solution is housing them. I don't know how else to say this. If you are a leader and you do not have a plan to house your constituents, that is a primary failure. Frankly, any person who's ever played a city builder game would understand not housing some of your population means you do worse at the video game. And we're talking about real life. We're not just talking about a goddamn game. But every single one of these neoliberal shills acts like it's a goddamn game. You have to have the ability to dream bigger than this. I'm sorry. But Jack, have you considered the donor class might not like that? You know what? At some point, Democrats have to say, fuck the donor class. Fuck the corporations. We need to do this to help our constituents. Because last I checked, politicians are elected to represent their constituents, not to represent billion-dollar corporations.
And that we're not going to be able to build a working majority and support for the resources that we need to help folks like that, whether it's drug treatment or
houses, the housing,
temporary housing or what have you.
Okay, just real quick, why does it have to be temporary? Why No, just give them housing. It can be full housing. It doesn't have to be shitty temporary housing. It can just be full housing. There are other countries in the world that have solved this problem with housing first initiatives. It just requires building the housing that is of decent quality, that is safe, that is solid, that people can raise a family in with dignity. You can then offer them an opportunity to buy it for themselves because it's actually worth a damn. Housing first initiatives, okay, save money. It's like Medicare for all, which saves money. When you house people okay, I'm going to back up a step. There is a cost in the decision of whether to have homelessness or to house people. There is a cost in that decision, and it costs more resources and more time and more money to leave people unhoused. I want that to sink in. it costs us more money. It costs the state more money to keep people unhoused. The state actually saves money with housing first initiatives. The state actually saves money to build housing instead of just letting a tent city go unaddressed. But Barack Obama, former president of the United States, sits there and is like, well, these are the only options. You either have to fully recognize their humanity, or you gotta put up with a tent city full of crime and disease right outside your house. Those are the only two options. Fucking failure to imagine, man.
We're not going to be able to generate support for it if we simply say, you know what, it's not their fault, and so they should be able to do whatever they want, because that's a losing political strategy.
Yeah, no shit, it's a losing political strategy, because you're effectively building a goddamn stupid-ass straw man in order to defend your position of, you know, shitty complacency, man. Like, my God. Yep, well, you recognize their humanity in their tent cities, so now they just get to do whatever they want. Like, what are you talking about, man? What kind of world are you constructing in your mind where recognizing the humanity of unhoused people means that they get to do whatever they want and laws don't apply to them anymore, and then you lose the election? I mean, I guess, yeah, in that situation, you would lose that election, but, like, there are so many profound failures already. It's beyond... This is beyond parody, how bad this is.
That doesn't mean that we care less about those folks. It means if we really care about them, then we got to try to figure out how do we gain majority support and be practical in terms of what we can get through at this moment in time and build on those victories. That a lot of times...
Yes, we have to embrace incrementalism in order to do this. Or, just going to throw this out there, you build a plan that has concrete steps that work towards your ultimate goal. You don't need to just, like, get little crumbs here and there. You can just, like, come up with a sensible plan that gets you to where you want to go and pass that as a piece of legislation. And if people aren't on board with it, you campaign in order to make it popular, because that's your job as an elected official.
Is the arguments that are taking place, but they become sort of performative, and people start saying, you know, oh, you're selling out, or conversely, I think sometimes folks at the center say, you know, you're being impractical and dismissing legitimate critiques and concerns. And what we need to be able to do is to maintain both ideas at the same time, which is our long-term goals have to be driven by our values and our core beliefs and our ethics and our morals.
Okay, but again, this embrace of incrementalism, I think it's a profound failure. It's a failure of imagination. A failure of what could be. Like, don't let them tell you we don't have money to do better by people. Don't tell, like, I'm sorry, that's just fucking bullshit. The Trump administration gave $1 trillion to the wealthiest people to ever exist, and almost $100 billion to ICE. And, like, I'm sorry, we can do literally anything. It does not matter. Like, never let them trap you like this ever again. Like, oh, well, our long-term goals are good, but we have to wait 50 years to achieve them. No, we don't. That's bullshit.
In the sense that every person counts, and short-term, we got to win elections.
Right.
And anyway, the good news...
Yeah, no one ever won elections promising to house people and give them health care.
News is, I think that the folks that we are fighting politically, the current White House, this administration, and their enablers, they're behaving so badly They are doing such crazy stuff that it shouldn't be hard for our side to coalesce around the areas where we agree on and focus on that. And I think that that is going to happen if we are effective in winning the midterms, if we then have a robust primary for who's going to be the next Democratic president. We shouldn't be afraid of having a robust debate. I want all comers to sort this out. I benefited from having about as grueling a primary as I could have. It made me a better candidate. It ultimately made me a better president because I had been tested. My ideas had been tested. The story I was telling about America had been tested. And that's what we should be looking for rather than expecting that somehow we're going to all come up with some consensus blueprint master plan that everybody's going to execute. Democrats aren't good at doing that anyway.
Yeah. Well, I think, one block of voters who I think there has been particular focus paid to right now is young voters. And, you were able to mobilize a generation of young voters in a way that...
can I just introduce something that it just makes me mad knowing it exists, but just real quick. So this is the George W. Bush Institute. Just a cool little thing to know exists. Critics of Housing First claim that the recent increase in chronic homelessness, rising costs, and paucity of employed tenants are evidence of the program's shortcomings. But such claims not only disregard the damage done by Utah's shift to Operation Rio Grande in 2017, but also ignore the data. In 2020, a review of 26 studies confirmed that a Housing First approach decreases homelessness by 88%, increases housing stability by 41%, and improves quality of life for the unhoused relative to traditional approaches. The data also proves that the economic benefits of Housing First outweigh the costs. For every dollar invested in the program, Housing First saves $1.44. That's from the George W. Bush Institute. And we're at a point where Obama is incapable of outdreaming George W. Bush's acolytes. That's embarrassing. Absolutely embarrassing. Well, but there's no way we could fix it. If we grant them human rights, then they get to do crimes without any kind of a punishment. No, that's not how that fucking works. Jesus Christ, man.
Hadn't been done before. I got involved in politics because of you, and in fact, a lot of millennials, folks my age, got involved in politics because of you. When I was a student, you could not find any other students on campus who were not supporting your campaign. Democrats and you had owned the cultural zeitgeist in a way that hadn't been done before, and frankly hasn't been done since. And we've seen a shift happen, obviously, from 2008, 2012 up to 2024.
Right.
And for the first time, we saw Democrats really lose their grip on culture in a way that hadn't happened before. And so what is your advice in terms of remobilizing a generation of Americans that we've had trouble mobilizing up to this point?
Well, look, part of it has to do with the fact that I was young.
Yeah.
So
maybe don't nominate octogenarians?
Look, I'm 64 now. I'm pretty healthy 64. Feel great.
Yeah.
But the truth is, half of the references that my daughters make about social media, TikTok, etc., I don't know who they're talking about.
Yeah.
There is a element of, at some point, you age out. You're not connected directly to the immediate struggles that folks are going through. And so I'm not making a hard and fast rule here, but I do think that Democrats do well when we have candidates who are plugged into the moment, to the zeitgeist, to the times, and the particular struggles that folks are thinking about as they look towards the future rather than look backward toward the past. And so some of it is choosing candidates who check that box. I do think that there is an element of joy that Democrats lost sometimes. Our campaign was fun. We had look, it wasn't always fun for me, but we built a community. We gave people a sense that if you are part of this, you're doing something meaningful, and it wasn't just talk.
Well, and then we burned them all after my campaign was successful, and we never did anything with that network ever again, because I gave up all of that for my corporate donors. Then Occupy Wall Street happened, and they were all just such little whiners.
Young people ran our campaigns. We empowered them. We put them in charge. They were out there figuring stuff out. I'm not the person who was figuring out our media strategy. I was not the person who was out there, knocking on doors and talking to voters and creating events. It was 20 and 30-year-olds. And so what happened in our campaign, and what you recently saw in Mondami's campaign in New York, when there's that sense of joy and engagement and involvement, then people feel like, all right, this is not just some transactional grind. This is
Lady APR, I appreciate your Stargate reference. Thank you.
Me becoming part of a community and joining with others. And I think young people respond to that. And then a corollary to that is I do think that culturally, and I've talked about this before, we did turn off. I think there was a certain way of talking about issues for Democrats where we sounded like scolds. And I've said this before. There was a virtue signaling that made it seem as if ordinary folks, if they did not say things in exactly the right way or meet this litmus test, that they were being chastised, pushed away. And the truth is, most of us, all of us, are complicated, and we have blind spots, and sometimes we say dumb stuff, and if you want to create an environment that is welcoming and makes people feel, okay, there's room for me here, then the message and the story we tell has to be, all right, none of us are perfect. All of us count. We all have good in us that we can tap into. We can all learn from each other. And I think that is something we need to recover. That's part of the fun of politics. That's part of
what? Okay, but like, it kind of seems to me like if you are acknowledging that we're all flawed and we have good intentions, then correction should not be a big deal, right? If you are at a party and you're all having fun and you're all welcome there, and someone says something that isn't cool to the other people at the party just go, "Oh, hey man, that wasn't cool. Can you don't say stuff like that here?" And then the person who said it just goes, "Oh, okay, sorry." And then like they continue, right? Like that's how that would work. But when he's talking about, well, don't call out people. It's not cool. We're all flawed. But like if we're all flawed and we're all good natured and we're all in the same boat, and you make a gaffe, one, wouldn't you want to know you made a gaffe? Two, maybe that gaffe was actually kind of a big deal, and people are trying to communicate that it was a big deal. You know? Like, maybe you said something that was racially insensitive. Maybe you said something that was, like, insensitive to a trans person. Like, if you are also here in good faith and, like, a good, like, hearted individual, wouldn't you want to know that? Yeah, Obama isn't being very cash money. I agreed, Nocturnal. Jack, don't you get it? That's scolding, and that's bad. I mean, I think, yeah, I'm very frustrated by this interview.
The community and the social bonding that can come about, and we saw that in Minneapolis. I mean, somebody showed me a friend of mine, Michelle Norris, is from Minnesota, and she was up there, and she was going around talking to neighbors and people she'd known for a long time as they were mobilizing protests and activities around ICE. And she showed me a clip of this street band that was performing every night after all these activities had been taking place and protests, etc. And they were just out there and they were playing music, and I'm trying to figure out how they were playing, horns and drums, etc. in like 0-degree weather, because I would not have been able to put my lips on on a trumpet. And people were celebrating what they had accomplished. And it was an embodiment of the values that make us care about other people. And that, I think, is a spirit that when Democrats tap into that spirit, then we win. The other side does the mean, angry,
demagoguery,
exclusive, us, them.
I'm sorry, but boiling this down to tone, I think, is extraordinarily tone deaf. The difference between the left and the right isn't that the left are so sweet and nice. It's not that the left are they're always baking brownies for each other. The left, where we're all sweet little grannies and pure-mouthed virgins. Like, no, like, come on, dude. The left can also be foul-mouthed and, abrasive and mean. But the issue is, we're correct. And if it will further our cause to be mean and abrasive, then we should do that in the situations where it would further our cause to be mean and abrasive. If it will further our cause to be nice, we should do that. Because our cause is just. But this idea that, like, the right are the only ones who can be mean. It's also a similar trap that gets people into the thinking of, like, oh, wait a minute. The left has always told me that the right was mean, but someone at a Trump rally was nice to me. Or a Trump supporter helped me carry my bicycle up some stairs. The tone is not what is important here. It is the principles that are important. And if you are so willing to sell out the principles because of the tone, then you never really believed in it in the first place.
Divisive politics. That's their home court.
Yeah.
Our court is coming together. Our court is, look, a great example. Wasn't political. Bad Bunny's.
Yeah, our court is when the billionaires and the people come together to support the Democrats. That's our court.
Halftime show.
I knew you were going to say that. Yeah.
Well, it resonated. It was smart because it wasn't preaching. It was showing. It was demonstrating and displaying. This is what a community is, and people who.
It wasn't it was kind of preaching. It was making an argument.
Did not speak Spanish and have never been to Puerto Rico. They saw that elderly woman serving a drink, and the kids dancing with their grandmas, and it was intergenerational, and it was a reminder of what Dr. King called the beloved community can look like, which is not perfect, and it's messy sometimes. And, I guarantee you, not all those lyrics were probably politically correct. And if you translated them, and, they're, people are complicated. But there was a sense of, all right, there's room for everybody here.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is where we win.
I'm here, Lav.
What's up? Your presidential center is opening.
What bothers me about using Bad Bunny here as like his go-to example of this is that Bad Bunny, with his halftime show, was explicitly calling out like the corporate abuses of Puerto Rico, like that were perpetrated against Puerto Rico and its people. Like the whole electrical grid portion is like directly about the corporate abuses of Puerto Rico. And like I just have to say, like, when you are sitting there and you're like, well, it's either a question of, do you treat these people as human beings if they're homeless, or do you just live with a tent encampment outside your house? That he said earlier, I don't really see how you can take the Bad Bunny halftime show and make any arguments based on that when, like, you have the kind of outlook you do that you demonstrated with the homeless issue, right? Like, he demonstrated already that he does not give a fuck about the homeless issue. It's such a sad, heartrending situation. But at the same time, we have to be realistic about it. And like, if you aren't willing to do anything more than just like make some kind of hand wavy gesture at like incremental progress that may or may not one day, by the grace of God, actually like get people out of the horrible situation they're in, like, you are effectively doing nothing better than what Puerto Rico already lives under. If you're willing to do that for homeless people in LA, you're certainly willing to do it to Puerto Rican folks who are living, hurricane to hurricane with a failing grid system that is implemented by private corporations that own all of the debt on Puerto Rico, which allows them to abuse the people of Puerto Rico even further. It's so frustrating. Yeah, like, dude literally had a halftime show showing Puerto Ricans working on the sugar plantations. Man, this interview is putting me in a bad headspace.
Up this summer, and you've dedicated your post-presidency to lifting up the next generation of leaders, oftentimes in defiance of people begging and pleading with you to stay involved in the political process. And so why is it important for you to defer to those people, especially at a moment where it feels like there is a vacuum of leadership on the left? You are among, if not the most popular politician.
I do appreciate Brian Tyler Cohen essentially asking, where the fuck have you been?
In America, and so you're right here, and so why is it important for you in this moment to make sure that you defer to others?
Well, first of all, I'm not a politician anymore, and I can't be, right? I mean, I guess technically I could run for, city council or something, but
I mean, dog, you're a former president. Like, you know better than anyone that when you show up someplace, you get cameras on you. You could be effectively using the bully pulpit right now to put pressure on the Trump administration and like actually change things for the better. It would take work on your part though, so maybe you don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I'm not in elected office. I don't have levers of power. I'm term limited out, and by the way, I believe.
Yeah, you don't have any levers of power. You just have extensive political connections and the ability to get a camera basically anywhere you go, and the ability to speak to a country of 300 million people. What kind of power could you possibly wield in any of these situations as a private citizen?
In the Constitution, and also I believe in my marriage, and Michelle would divorce me even if I could run again. But I've always believed, I mean, this has been a central tenet of my work even before I was in elected office, that our job as leaders is to lift up other leaders, to empower others, to...
Yeah, so why don't you come down here to Minneapolis and lift up some of the leaders who have actually been doing leading on the ground here? Why don't you lift up Jason Chavez, one of the Minneapolis City Council folks who've been actually going out there and doing the work? You should be coming here. Get cameras on ice, man. Like, you're the former president of the United States.
To find their gifts and help them exercise those gifts. And so when I left the presidency, I said, what's our foundation going to do? We care about climate change. We care about racial justice. We care about healthcare. We care about a whole bunch of issues, and I work on those issues. Now, right now, I'm spending a lot of time helping to think about how we're going to respond to AI as it's coming down the pike, and it's moving fast. So I care about specific issues, but the thing I thought I could do uniquely.
Me, while watching this interview. It might be a bit loud. Also, patience of saint as always, Jack.
Doing my best. Yes.
Michelle and I still have the capacity, not just here in the United States, but globally, to inspire and motivate young people.
I mean, like, even if you are afraid to get on, like, the front lines, like, just show up and have an interview with some of these people. You don't have to be, like, out in the thick of it, like, fist fighting ice, but, like, you can show up. You can walk around the city with your cameras. You can show up and talk to Jason Chavez. Also, if you can think of anything that would kick a goddamn hornet's nest harder than arresting Barack Obama, then I can't think of anything that would make people as angry as fast.
And invite them in to this process. And that's what we need. We just talked about it. You look at where excitement's going to come from. It's going to come from...
Yeah, but Don Lemon doesn't have the protection of being a former president. Like, there's a big difference between being Don Lemon, normal guy, relatively famous normal guy, and Barack Obama.
The 20, 30-year-olds who know firsthand what it means to not be able to buy a house.
Yeah, I mean, also, Barack Obama literally has his own security called the Secret Service.
Know firsthand what it means to see some of the ladder's opportunity being taken away. Have grown up in a moment in which there's more social isolation, right? And so
I'm just saying that if Obama has all this power and isn't using it, he must be a coward. Oh yes, he is absolutely a coward.
And understand both the good and the bad of social media. And so they're the ones who are going to craft these, who are going to remake our institutions so that they are consistent with the values that are, I think, timeless. And so what we've tried to do at the foundation has been...
Wait, former presidents have Secret Service? Yeah, for life. And any children of former presidents have Secret Service until they're 16.
And to identify potential leaders, not just with traditional credentials, not just the kids coming out of fancy schools or with the top grades, but union organizers and grassroots organizers, as well as journalists and teachers and healthcare professionals and human rights activists. And we've now had thousands of folks go through the program, and these are folks who are doing remarkable stuff at very young ages. I mean, they're setting up health clinics in sub-Saharan Africa, or they're designing new programs for intervention to help with the opioid crisis in Appalachia, or they're working on How do we educate kids and using technology in remote rural areas and Native American reservations? Remarkable folks are doing amazing stuff. And the Presidential Center, which will be opening up in June, is going to be the hub around which all this activity happens. And there'll be a museum with Michelle's dresses, since that's what people want to see.
Yeah.
We'll have some sports memorabilia and some cool stuff in there. But really, the heart of the Presidential Center is going to be the music studio, to where kids are learning how to tell stories through music, and a place to record podcasts so they can learn how to talk about the issues in ways that resonate. And there's a Chicago Public Library in there, and there's an auditorium where young people will be exposed to world leaders who are coming through and can talk about their own journey. And what that does is it builds a community of activists, and it reminds people you're not alone. You're not alone in your sorrow when you see some of the stuff that's been happening in this country over the last year. But you're also not alone in being able to figure out how do we push back and come up with new solutions, and how do we remake these institutions so that they work for this generation. And that kind of spirit is what we hope this Presidential Center will constantly refresh and renew. This is kind of a social change university, and we want.
God, dude literally is going all in. He's going all in on making a think tank to try and find the Democratic Joe Biden. Not Joe Biden, the Democratic Joe Rogan. God, I hate it. I hate it. He's made an entire think tank designed to find the one Joe Rogan who can slay the other. That literally, it's what he did. I can't, guys. I'm dying. I'm dying internally, and I don't know how to articulate these thoughts. Holy fuck. I gotta be honest with you. I really hope AOC is gonna run for president. Because out of the entire field of candidates, she's the only one that I can see breaking free of this mentality. I'm like, this is killing me. I feel awful just listening to this. Oh, God. We will construct the Joe Rogan in the presidential library, using pieces of every podcaster that comes through our halls.
Just ordinary visitors who don't think of themselves as activists, as they go through these exhibits and they see what's been done in the past, we want them to think, well, what can I do? And we'll be giving them all kinds of ways in which they can then connect with local organizations. And
wouldn't a Rogan plus anti-Rogan reaction be enough energy to destroy the planet? Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Get active in their own communities around the things that they care about. That kind of reinvigorating our civic muscles, giving people
our civic muscles. What kind of protein shake does anti-Rogan drink?
Sense of I'm not going to just sit here and doom scroll or occasionally tweet some complaint about what's happening, but that I actually have agency and I can actually make a difference. We want to encourage that, and that's what we saw and have been seeing across the country in response to the violations and overreach and lawlessness.
That's true. Milo Rossi is the true anti-Rogan, and the Democrats will never embrace him because he's almost certainly a socialist. And I know that because I've watched a lot of his show and I've listened to the words he says.
Google debunkers.
That's been coming out of this administration. We just have to encourage that and cultivate that and not assume that it happens on its own. I became president because very early on in my career, I had people teach me the power.
Oh, they're very clearly in like a sound room. Why is there like a rumble
Of community and
I thought
other
that was on
people
my end.
joining together around common interests. And I tried to I tried to manifest what I had learned in every campaign I ran and tried to ride that all the way through my presidency. And I didn't figure out all that stuff on my own. And we have a long history in this country, dating back to the abolitionist movement and the suffragist movement, and on through the civil rights movement and the union movement. And we have a long history internationally. Gandhi learning from Thoreau, who then inspires King, who then inspires Mandela, who in the meantime, like Walesa, is helping to, and Solidarity are helping to bring down the Iron Curtain and inspiring the people power in the Philippines. And
What really pisses me off about listening to Obama speak is the constant gesturing at people power, as if people aren't motivated by trying to get a government into power that will provide basic needs like food and housing and electricity, etc. Like, as if people aren't brought together by profound failures in the system because they need the basic necessities that are required to live a life of dignity, And it bothers me because by not acknowledging that, he talks in like broad strokes about, people power and like the power of change and like stuff like that without really attaching it to any material concerns. And that has, on a long-term basis, profoundly harmed our country, I think, and our ability to talk about and understand issues. It's frustrating as hell.
That spirit, that energy, it's out there, and you can feel it, but it's bottled up. We haven't given enough outlets for young people to figure out, how do I become a part of that? And that's this enormous untapped power that we have to get back to.
So I want to do a little bit of a lightning round here because it's not often I'll get access to the President of the United States. So a couple questions here. Are aliens real?
They're real, but I haven't seen them, and they're not being kept in, what is it?
Area 51?
Area 51. There's no underground facility unless there's this enormous conspiracy and they hid it from the President of the United States.
What was the first question you wanted?
I mean, no follow-ups on the fact that even if you're like, oh, well, there's no conspiracy, there's no area under 51, no follow-up on him saying unequivocally, yes, aliens are real? Because we don't need to physically have them. Yeah, insane thing to say and not elaborate on. Exactly. Like, if he's just straight up saying aliens are real, that's huge. Exactly what the aliens would say. But, like, if we know, like, there are a million different ways we could know aliens are real and exist without us physically having a specimen or, like, a secret facility or whatever. Oh, okay, he made a statement after the fact about statistically speaking. Okay, I mean, I agree with that. Statistically speaking, they gotta be real. Also, they discovered some, like, amino acids on Mars that are very exciting.
Answered when you became president?
Where are the aliens?
Where are the aliens? Is there a person that you most want to meet that you haven't met yet?
I'll be honest with you. Being president or even being an ex-president, I can kind of meet everybody. So I've met a lot of folks.
Yeah.
The person who I have not yet met,
Riverboat Jack.
and that I'm looking forward to meeting, and I hope I get an opportunity sometime in the future, is the new Pope, who is from Chicago and a White Sox fan. I had the pleasure of getting to know Pope Francis pretty well, and he was legit. You know, there's some figures. He's one. The Dalai Lama is another, who they're how you hope they are. They kind of walk the walk.
Yeah.
And my sense of this new Pope is he's cut from that cloth.
Yeah.
You know, somebody who
Well, he is a man of the cloth.
worked in places, you know, that really needed help, and
Like, say, an LA-based tent city that has elected leadership that isn't actually, I don't know, building housing and providing housing first solutions.
what wasn't just preaching from a pulpit, but getting his hands dirty, trying to help people. So I'm looking forward to talking to him.
I think we can. I think
At some point I'll probably have him. Yeah.
What world leader did you like the most and the least?
You know, there are a lot of world leaders I enjoyed. Angela Merkel I became very close to because she really was the leader of Europe during my presidency, and we were grappling with a bunch of different stuff. She came from a center-right tradition. I obviously come from a center-left position, but she had integrity, very, you know, wicked smart, and
Wicked smart.
you know, we're both analytical and practical, and try to figure out how to problem solve, and so she became a very close partner to mine. I'm gonna defer on the leaders I like least. There's enough of a public record. People probably have a sense of some of the folks who I wasn't happy with.
Best prank out of the White House when you were president?
What?
Look, I'll be honest with you. Folks aren't running pranks in the White House. They're Secret Service. Everybody's busy.
Yeah.
If there were pranks, they weren't run on me, and I didn't.
You didn't pull any?
I tended not to pull pranks. People are intimidated enough by a president.
Yeah.
You know, you don't want to punch down on a prank.
Yeah.
If you're gonna pull off a prank, it's got to be on somebody who can prank you back, and wasn't nobody gonna prank me. Yeah.
All right, last question here. Is Tupac alive?
He's alive on my playlist.
All right, we'll leave it there.
There you go.
Mr. President,
I enjoyed it, Brian.
I appreciate it.
Thank you
so
Keep
much.
up doing the good work.
Well, that sapped almost entirely my will to live, but I will regain it, and you know, we'll reconvene in the future. But like, closing thoughts here, Obama represents a profound failure point in this nation's history, where he was elected to power on a groundswell of enthusiasm from people who genuinely believed that he represented change from the, you know, essentially deeply conservative proto-fascist years of the George W. Bush administration. And instead of actually using that power, he threw it away in exchange for corporate donations, essentially. And that represents a colossal problem, because it then set the tone for who he cozied up to, who he set up for victory in the future. And ultimately, it was not the kind of people, it was not the kind of movement that he wound up creating that was capable of beating Donald Trump. It was not capable of putting up a fight to the more overtly fascistic campaign of Donald Trump, the more nationalistic, fascistic campaign. And ultimately, it then led to Joe Biden getting into office, who was also woefully under-equipped and unequipped to deal with the current moment, and this shattered the left response. And it's one of the reasons why Joe Biden's re-election campaign, Kamala Harris's campaign, was so anemic. A lot of it can be traced back to the fact that Obama rug pulled us. We thought he was going to be the hope and change candidate. We thought he might be, in fact, the guy to give working class people in this country a fair shake. And instead, he spent the entirety of his presidency playing patty cake with Republicans, waiting for the fever to break, and they just said, lol, no, over and over again, and denied at every turn the ability to have normal dealings with the presidency. Until they waited it out, they waited out the clock, they got their guy in, and the second their guy was in, they looted the country. They looted the goddamn country. And then after Biden, they looted the country again. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that instead of building upon the organizing foundation that Obama had going into his first presidency, it all got burned to the ground. The boats were burned, and the folks who were organizing for Obama wound up bitterly a part of Occupy Wall Street. And after that movement was broken, like, a lot of folks had nowhere to go, and so they went back to being relatively politically inactive. Not everyone, but a lot of folks. And it was only with Bernie Sanders reemerging that those folks began to get more politically active again. And as we go forward towards 2028, Bernie Sanders is too old. But it's possible that maybe AOC can tap into what Bernie actually started, as opposed to Obama's false start. And maybe, just maybe, we can finally get someone into power who's actually got the backs of working folks. Occupy broke a lot of people's will to action. It hurt to watch. Yeah, it did. It hurts to even, remember, to be honest. So, folks, if you got anything out of this, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the follow button, and let me know what you thought about this down in the comments. Am I being too harsh on Obama? I don't think I am. In fact, there are a whole lot of things I could have brought up that I didn't. But let me know what you think in the comments. And also, folks, we need to get organized, because the midterms are coming up, and then the general election is not too far away from that. So, folks, join your local Dems, join your local DSA, get involved today. If you need help, join our Discord. Reach out to GamerG for help with your DSA. Reach out to Dragonfly for help with your local Dems. And last but not least, please check out ImogeneOlivia.com. Gender euphoric lingerie designed from the ground up for trans femmes. Tested with cis men, cis women, non-binary folks. It is non-tucking lingerie. Looks great on everybody. Very comfortable. And also new styles, colors, and sizes coming in the near future. So check out, link down in the doobly-doo. I'm actually wearing the bralette right now. It's very comfortable. And all that being said, let's keep on going. Let's not be mired down in the past with Obama's failures. Let's rise above and get more organized. Let's go.
Riverboat deck is going to town. All the viewers gather round. Twitch and YouTube is where she streams. All that content is bursting the seams. Politics, gaming, and plenty more. Her sense of fashion you'll adore. So grab your stuff and hop aboard. We're going straight to Jack's Discord. Riverboat Jack.